Welcome to the Prototyping Show. We are prototyping engineers who work with customers and innovators across the globe to envision the art of the possible. We deliver groundbreaking solutions and services on the AWS cloud. With our guests, we explore the mechanisms that drive technology innovation, get hands-on with AWS technologies, and discuss the latest and most interesting developments in the world of AWS cloud. This is the Prototyping Show.
And here we are.
Sorry, I stole your word.
That's okay.
How are you,
Good morning.
Mark?
I'm well. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 1 of the Prototyping Show. It's great to have everybody join us today. We do apologize for taking a little break of absence. It's been a busy time. Charles, how have you been?
Been very well. Yeah, it seems like ages that we haven't seen ourselves on Twitch. So it's very, very good. Very excited to be here. Very excited to have everyone with us today, and very excited to kickstart the season 2. So yeah, no, been very good. Obviously, as everyone imagine, a lot is happening in the technology field. So been busy with that, obviously. Yeah, and very excited to share a little bit about that later. How about you, Mark?
Yeah, also been busy, but really busy with some great things. You know, there's a lot going on in the industry. Obviously, our topic for today, generative AI, is the really hot topic. So I'm looking forward to having a good in-depth chat today about that. But, you know, I took a really good summer break, spent good time with the family, did a little bit of hands-on, you know, sharpen the saw and play with a few APIs here and there. So it was great. And I'm really excited to get back to the Prototyping Show for the rest of the year. So tell me, Charles, what is hot for you at the moment?
Well, a lot of things are hot. I'm living in Singapore, so it's very cold any time of the year. But no, in terms of technology, obviously everything around generative AI, and we're gonna talk about that, and we're super excited. And I'm pumped to talk about that topic. But everything around customer engagement, also personalization, all those things are very, very, very much in demand, and how we can help customers move forward faster into the providing this kind of services to their own customers, because today everyone is expecting a service that is very personalized, that is very, you want to feel unique, you want to feel it's quite funny, because if you look a little bit at the history, we went from those stores where you were really known because you're all the neighborhood store where you were known as an individual, to something a little bit less connected. And we're getting back to the fact that we want to feel that the brand knows us. So a lot of projects around that. How about you, down under?
Down under. Look, very much the same, I think. You know, obviously there's a lot of macroeconomic impacts that are going on. So I think businesses are really focusing on driving out as much value as they can, cutting costs and optimizing their businesses. I think it's a great opportunity for companies to look at cloud services, look at migrations, accelerating those, you know, as well as reimagining how they can engage with their customers. And I think this generative AI wave that's upon us is one that I think is really challenging many businesses to rethink products and services and how they can interact with their customers in a really new, innovative and fresh way. It's been quite remarkable. You know, I was talking with somebody the other day and I said the last time I saw such a shift in an industry was when MPLS came to IP networks, and we changed the way that we kind of did, you know, routing and switching. So it's really exciting to be part of it. But it's all new, and you know the learning curve is really quite steep. You know, personally, I've spent a lot of time with my head in books, having to go back to my early mathematics and really wrap my head around how this generative AI stuff works. So why don't we actually get stuck into the meat of it, Charles? Do you want to talk us through what we're going to talk about today?
Absolutely. So I think what is important and why we're excited, so excited about this season two, and maybe only at the beginning so far, because that's only we have a plan of 3 episodes after we'll need to figure out. And obviously, as always, we're if you have any topics you would like us to talk about, please suggest within the comments with through our different channels and so on. And we're always listening. But yes, the three first episode we're very excited because we're gonna do three deep dive into generative AI, and we're going to go at different level, at different stage, which is also very exciting. So today we're going to have a very special guest who is the guy to know in terms of generative AI. And where I'm not introducing him yet, keeping the surprise, but yes, we're going to talk about, okay, what it is, the understanding what happened actually to change to see such drastic change in technology and so on. So they're very interesting conversation and really understanding more the the fundamental component of generative AI. Following episode next month will be about a hands-on approach. We'll have one of our prototypers to come on board and show us some of the project that person has worked on, and that's going to be also very cool because that's no noise, no. I cannot say the word obviously, but it's a very straightforward way uh, uh, to see the reality of it and how practical it is. And the third episode will be more about, okay, how can I put it? How can I have a more business approach and how I can really uh, convince my boss actually that generative AI is here to stay and is we need to invest. I mean, you need to invest as soon as possible into it. So bringing a little bit of our working backward approach, very peculiar to Amazon, and that's it. So three very good, very interesting episode, I believe, and yeah, so we are pumped.
I can't wait. Really looking forward to them, and hopefully we can jam in as many acronyms as possible into the next three into the next three episodes. So, Charles, I'm really interested in your view. Obviously, the generative AI space, it's pretty broad. There's a lot in there. What are you hearing and what are you seeing around the world in terms of the way businesses are thinking about generative AI? Maybe some of the use cases. It'd be good just to kind of level set on that before we bring in our very special guest.
Yeah, so from what I see directly from my own customers, we see a lot of interest about how you can improve your handling your customer support, but also provide better ways to retrieve information from a vast corpus, which very often has heterogeneous format of document and so on. So those two elements and how you aggregate that to really generate an insight that will be powerful that you can activate. I think that's what we're seeing in ASEAN at the moment. It comes with some complexities, but nothing is impossible, and today even more than before. How about you? What are the main challenges in Australia and New Zealand?
Well, I think what I'm hearing, and it's not just really across Australia and New Zealand, I think it's around the world, is, we're hearing different, I'm definitely hearing different stories from different segments. If I think around enterprise, it's really around how do I take, this new technology, how do I use it in a way that's safe, sound, and secure with my enterprise data?
That's true.
And, where is the best place to do that and how do we do it? If I think about sort of greenfield customers, small and medium business customers, they're really about, how do we take, for example, large language models that are out there already today, quickly deploy them, fine tune them, add the context from our own systems, and do that incredibly fast. So I see security, speed, and then this real thirst for exploring different use cases and trying different things. So this experimentation. So I think it's a really interesting time to be alive because generative AI I think has really captured the minds of the world, and it's going to be amazing to see what people do with it. But I think even more amazing will be to bring on our guest. I'm really curious and excited to talk with our guest. Do you want to do some quick intros?
Yeah, so our guest is Mr. Machine Learning, Mr. Gen AI in Amazon. Chris Howard is our APJ lead, machine learning lead, and really the our guru for anything generative AI related. So thanks, Chris. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's a little bit late. We are sorry, but very, very cool to have you.
Hey, no problem, Charles. Great to be here. Thank you for the two of you for having me on the show.
Oh, we couldn't think of anybody better. I mean, you're the one that's certainly keeping me on the straight and narrow on this stuff. So thanks for joining us.
No, very welcome.
So today, yeah, we would like to, obviously there is so many things happening. So we are counting on you to make us understand better what is really, how could I say, what is the truth versus what is the noise. As Mark mentioned previously, there is a lot of question around the use of generative AI and so on. So we're very excited to talk with you about that. And maybe I'm going to start by my first question, and it's about, I mean, you're aware we talked about it, but a few years ago, I was leading the technology part of a research and development center in the advertisement world, and my team was actively looking at how to generate content in order to generate actually copyrights, because it was advertisement. So we were working and we're progressing very well. And actually, Google was looking at us saying, "Wow, that's really cool what you're doing, guys." And other people were looking at it. We had the not documentary, but we had some press articles and so on about work. But the funny part is that we could only generate 3 sentences together that were making sense. Beyond this magic number of 3, nothing was really making sense anymore. So what happened? Yeah, my work was in 2018. What happened since to get to that level of incredible of impact and of generation? Yes.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Charles, and it's come up many times. Yeah, so if I look at the last 6 months, I look at the conversations I've had with our customers across Asia Pacific and Japan, one of the common questions is, what has changed? Why now? What's different? What is it that's fueling this period that we're in? And as Mark said, it's a really great time, or a really exciting time to be alive. There's a number of things. So your work obviously was probably LSTMs and RNNs and models that or network architectures that were built in a way that started to incorporate some level of history or knowledge context of what you've built in the past. And I guess there's a couple of things that happen. So first of all, over the last couple of years, we've seen significant improvements in ML technique. So the model architectures and the techniques that have been applied to process the huge volumes of data that are available, but also do that on the compute platforms that are available to us, that they've evolved significantly. So when we look back, not that many years ago, back in 2017, the launch of the transformer architecture, that's significantly transformed the way that things operate today. And so moving from training models almost in a serial fashion to now being able to train models in parallel with large bodies of content, the context window that we're operating in is in some cases, tens of thousands of characters or tokens. And so we've seen a massive shift in the way that we train these very large models, these deep learning models, that has presented a whole new way of learning from internet scale data. And when we talk about internet scale data, I think it was Fortune magazine talked about, we're going to generate more data in the next 3 years than has been created in the last 30 alone. They're just staggering numbers about the sheer volume of data that's available. So these very large models have been trained on internet scale data, terabytes and terabytes of text data or images. And I think the other thing that's really important is we've now reached the point combining transformers with the volume of data, but also the virtually unlimited compute that's available in the cloud. And I think that convergence or that kind of inflection point of those 3 drivers has arrived at this point today where we're seeing enormous potential and really transformative capabilities that we've not seen in the past. That generative AI is not necessarily that new a technology. Most of us have seen deepfakes. We've seen some of the very early attempts at kind of generating a visual interpretation from a short piece of text. StatGAN, I think, was 2015, 2016, somewhere around then. So it's not necessarily that new, but certainly the transformer in 2017 and this architecture around neural networks has really transformed the way that things are operating today. What when you look back at your world, Charles, you kind of mentioned 3 sentences. You know, what did? Well, I'm asking you questions now. This is good. Yeah, there's kind of these three sentences. What did in what you've seen recently? You know, what's different to you for you? I mean, 3 sentences allows you to do a certain amount, but when we look at tools like ChatGPT, we look at some of the output of these models. We're now looking at, you know, some people are talking about writing their first book using these technologies. You know, is that something that you're seeing with our customers? Are they coming asking? I'd love to know, because I'm certainly seeing those kind of questions.
So no one has asked me yet about helping them to write a book with ChatGPT or with all the LLMs that we have on our platform. But yeah, no, I mean, first I want to jump back on what you were saying. I mean, the volume of data is amazing, but through that volumes also there is a lot of the manual pre-processing step that we needed to do previously that are not required anymore also. When I'm talking about our LLMs, well, we're getting old advertisement, and we're trying to tag parts of it, countries, this kind of element, because then the LSTM could generate, based on the tags, a recommendation, and you could just dynamically after change the country by whatever elements you want. But that's not required anymore, which is absolutely incredible also.
No. And I think that's probably one of the other big transformations we've gone through, is that when we're training on these very large corpus of data, and when I say internet scale, you're typically talking about a crawl of the web. You know? So you see the common crawl, you see the pile, you see other sources of data. We're using that data in a very unstructured way. So if you think about traditional machine learning, we typically have 2 styles of training: supervised and unsupervised training. Supervised, obviously, we're presenting some training data, but we're also giving the model an example of what the output should look like. We're telling it what kind of output we expect for a given input set. With large language models, we're really throwing that notion away. And so this idea of annotating, labeling, tagging your data up front is now out the window, because what we're doing is essentially using language that exists today and masking that language to then train these models in essentially an unsupervised fashion. And that has meant that, again, combined with the volume, combined with the compute, combined with these new techniques, and the fact we don't need to label this data anymore, we're now able to train on these very, very large data sets and produce some awesome results. And that's a game changer. I think for many data scientists, it's probably the bane of their life, having to go and train, build those training sets by labeling data. We have a great solution, by the way, if you're looking to do that. SageMaker Ground Truth. It's an awesome platform for building out your ground truth. But if we don't have to do that, then it's a real game changer.
So, Chris, probably being the least technical person here, I'm just trying to follow the thread. So I think, if I understood correctly, there's really no need to train models anymore. Is that always the case, or are we still going to see organizations training new models? And how's that going to sort of work in the industry?
Yeah, I think you'll see that there's 3 styles of consumption for these large language models. So we build these models and we go through a process that we typically call pre-training. And we create something that it's a distillation of lots and lots of data. And these models, if you've ever heard Julian Simon talk from Hugging Face, he talks about these models being a mile wide and an inch deep. I like that analogy. They're generally good at lots of things. They're not awesome at any one thing. And so to make them awesome, you typically need to go through some level of adaptation, some level of fine-tuning to turn those models from being generally good at lots of things into something that's really good at 1 or 2 very narrow things. And so while there's still a need to potentially train models, that heavy lifting, that upfront lifting of building the foundation model in the first place, is probably only going to be for a select few. Not every organization on this planet has the skills, the time, the resources, the need, or can recognize the commercial opportunity of actually building a very large foundation model. That's just not the reality for many companies. Now, we do see companies that are doing that. We've seen Bloomberg recently have gone off and trained their own very large language model. And I think that's primarily down to the fact they have a lot of data. That data is differentiated, and they saw real commercial value in building a model and actually creating their own foundation model that they could then sell on and monetize with their customers. So that's the first cohort, the folks that are building their own model. I think the second cohort are those that are going to lift an existing foundation model, and they're going to fine tune it. They're going to adapt it to their world, and they're going to make it either problem or task specific. I think we'll see a lot of organizations that are going to go down this route. They're going to bring maybe some of their own data that is unique to their world or unique to the problem that they're solving, and they're going to fine tune a model, and that's going to allow them to take something that is generally good to being really good at solving for a particular problem. And then the last cohort are really those organizations or those users that just want to use this technology off the shelf. They want to be able to deploy and maybe access these models through an API or bundled up within an application. And so we're going to see the likes of productivity enhancement for developers with our Code Whisperer solution. And I think, Charles, you've probably got a future show on Code Whisperer. We're going to see users consume large language models, but as an application consumer rather than someone that's going to worry about how do I manage and deploy a model. So while training of models has not necessarily gone away, I think there are various styles of consumption, building your own model, fine-tuning an existing model, or maybe just leveraging a model and using it off the shelf.
Wow, okay.
Everyone's journey will vary.
Yeah, it's a plethora of options, but I think you've given some good sort of pointers there around what people should be thinking about as they're looking across those three different options.
Yep.
And what do you think?
There's some nuance there. Sorry, Charles. There is some nuance, and so when we talk about fine-tuning, adaptation, there's maybe a misconception in the market that you have to go and fine-tune. There are some really great examples of organizations like S02e01 Labs out of Tel Aviv. Actually, one of our partners, their models are available today through SageMaker Jumpstart. I think we might show some of those a little bit later on, or at least talk to them in a bit more detail. They've actually gone through that process of fine-tuning to a particular task on your behalf. And so if you're looking to do things like summarization, generation, even Q&A against the body of text, they've built some awesome models that do that for you, so you don't have to go through that process of training or adapting those models. Sorry, Charles.
No. I mean, actually, you kind of answer my question, because I wanted also to get your opinion on, obviously, the maturity, but also sometimes there is a little bit of a feeling that there is a fear of missing out. So, yeah, that's why the approach that you mentioned about the fact that it's not all about tuning; it's about many other things, and maybe other things instead of tuning. It's quite critical.
Yeah, I think that's between the hype in the marketplace right now and the FOMO, the fear of missing out. Those are probably the two emotions, if you can call them emotions, the two things that we're seeing the most with our customers. There's a general level of interest, which is great. I think one of the things that ChatGPT has done in the consumer space is created awareness. And so from an AI perspective, we're having conversations with organizations that maybe never had looked to AI in the past, and that's a great thing for the industry at large. I think on the whole, I saw some numbers from Gartner recently, and they're showing that there's increased spending in AI off the back of your awareness in these technologies. And that spending is typically coming in areas like customer experience, customer retention, new revenue generation, less so in things like cost optimization, cost takeout, which is interesting given the current headwinds that we're facing, the economic headwinds. But certainly customer experience is the number one area that we're seeing. It doesn't mean, in many cases, when we talk to these customers, it doesn't mean they've necessarily got a use case in mind. Often chat is the trigger to the conversation, we'll see that they are generally interested. They're curious. They've got a certain level of need to want to explore and experiment. What we'll often find is that chat is the trigger, but often a safer, more secure, more deployable use case, something that you can manage the blast radius of, and potentially target a safer audience is perhaps sometimes where our customers are looking to start. So things like enterprise search has turned out to be a really interesting space where we can deploy these models and actually avoid some of the challenges that we know are potentially possible with these very large language models. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, absolutely, yes. And even when you're talking at the document search and so on, that's also a way to reduce the problems linked to hallucination and things like that, because you're able still to keep a track on which document is generating the insight. So that's something that we are seeing also. So that's great to hear.
Yeah, it's a really interesting area. I think this notion of how do I address this truthfulness in content? How do I ensure that I'm delivering on the right response? It's a really interesting area. I think lots of companies are looking to ensure they've got that sourcing, that attribution, that grounding in the response, so they can say this is the answer to their query, but also these are the links back to the source documents or the source repositories that I've used to actually get to this answer. And that's a pattern that we're seeing more and more common with our customers.
So I just wanted to call out a comment here from Hajamano, who's joined us. Thanks for joining us. An untethered real-time AI with web access would be nice. That's a really interesting one, right? I think, I'd be interested to hear your view, Chris, around, potentially some of the risks and some of the challenges of that internet scale sort of ingestion. And maybe we could touch on a little bit some of the sort of responsible or ethical AI considerations that you're hearing out there in the market.
Yeah. And while there is lots and lots of potential with generative AI, and we're seeing lots of general interest, the technology does come with some challenges. And so most of the viewers, I'm sure, have probably heard of this notion of hallucination. Ultimately, these models are really, really good predictive models. That's what they're good at. They're predicting the next word. In fact, they're predicting the next token based on all previous examples of that stream of tokens that have come in the past based on the training data. And so you're essentially parameterizing, you're baking into the model knowledge. You're taking your training data, you're encoding that in a way that allows you to recall that knowledge and then use it to generate new ideas, new conversations, new images, text, video, even music at this stage. It's really, really confident in its ability to do that. And we've all seen this notion of, if you go and ask a large language model, what were the football results 2 years ago? It's probably going to get that right because that knowledge has been parameterized and it's baked into the network. It's contained within the weights and the biases of that network, within the parameters of the network. If I go and ask it the football results from last week, something that it's never been trained on, it will probably still give me a really credible answer. Something that maybe looks authentic, looks realistic, but it's completely spoofy. It's made up. But it's going to do it in a really confident way. So this notion of hallucination is certainly a real challenge. And so organizations are definitely looking to, how do I address for that? How do I mitigate for that? I think the other challenge that we're seeing a lot of organizations concerned about is these models in many cases are opaque in nature. And so while they may generate a result, I don't necessarily know why. I've got no understanding as to how did it arrive at the answer it's given me. And that's, again, something that I know from a commercial standpoint. It may be funny when you're generating new content through a commercial application, through a consumer application, as you're looking for it to create a new haiku about bears drinking beer. It can be awfully funny, but when you're looking for a business decision where you're looking to augment a business process, you want to have some level of confidence that the data or the response from that model is actually something that you can trust and you can rely on. You may never fully automate your decision-making process, but you're certainly going to augment your decision-making process based on what those models produce. So there are some real challenges with using these technologies. I think the other thing that's really, really relevant is this space is evolving and will continue to evolve at a pace that has never been seen before. And so if you've done any reading of kind of works by people like Ray Kurzweil, and you hear about things like the law of accelerated returns and this exponential growth of technology, we're living that world today. We're really living and seeing that happen on a daily basis. And so whether it's a new model architecture, a new technique to improve on the way that we fine-tune these models or adapt these models, this space is evolving extremely quickly. And so, while that's not necessarily a challenge, from a confidence standpoint, it also presents organizations with the challenge of, how do I keep pace? How do I actually stay up to date with what's happening? And how do I ensure that I'm less focused on the model I'm using, but actually more concerned about the data I'm using to drive those models and the outcomes that I'm driving from that data? So, this will continue to quicken, and I'm sure it's going to be, again, it's a really interesting time to be alive.
And that, Chris, that pace and that increasing acceleration that we're seeing in that innovation in this space, I assume that there still needs to be some form of compute platform under this that's going to hopefully scale to get us there as well. So what's kind of the role of custom silicon in this space to ensure that we do have that capacity and that capability to support the acceleration?
It's one of the misconceptions that we often see with machine learning, never mind generative AI. I think machine learning at large, whether it be good old-fashioned ML or even deep learning, the cost of building your model initially is somewhat finite. It's relatively easy for you to come up with an estimation on what that's going to cost you. The compute required to do that is also something that you can scribble down on the back of a napkin or a piece of paper and actually figure out roughly what is this going to cost me, computational time and resource-wise, to actually build out. One of the things that many organizations fail to consider is that actually it's inference. It's using those models in production and running predictions with those models. In the case of generative AI, that's summarizing text, creating new text, generating images, that type of thing. It's the inference over the long tail, which is where the ultimate cost comes from. And so building the model gets you so far, but you want to operationalize those models, get them into production, and have users actually hit them. And while we can't talk too much to what others in the industry have done, it's probably going to cost several $1 million to create one of these very large models, but it may cost you several $100,000 a day to actually run them and deliver inference across these models, if you were to just use raw compute. And so custom silicon is a key part of how AWS are facing into that problem, looking at how do we drive down better price performance for model training in the first place. And then secondly, how do we drive the right price performance for inference, that long tail cost of running these models over the long term? And so custom silicon chips like our Trainium chipsets today available through our TRN1 instances give you roughly 50% improvement on price performance when it comes to comparing to a comparable EC2 instance. That's a massive saving for our customers. Combine that with our ability to parallelize this problem and run that kind of capability across many, many instances. So our largest EC2 ultra clusters now go up to 30,000 instances. That's something like 6.3 exaflops of capacity. That's a pretty beefy box. That's enough for most purposes. So from a training standpoint, parallelizing that problem and running on those boxes is a real reality. But then our Inferentia 2 chipset and what we have available through that instance family then is driving probably 40% price performance improvement to allow you to then run those models far cheaper, but also far more sustainably over the long tail. And so our investments in those custom chipsets and that custom silicon is a massive part of how we're approaching this market, recognizing again that there's this long tail cost that we really need to address for our customers.
Yeah, it's really looking around corners, I guess, isn't it, on behalf of the customers to make sure that we have the right that there is the right price point there to run these things at scale.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. I think, cost is one aspect. And so typically when we look at large language models, we're looking to balance three things. We're looking at cost, we're looking at price. We're looking at cost, we're looking at performance, and we're looking at accuracy. And you're really trying to balance across those three areas. So certainly from a cost standpoint, talked about the use of custom silicone and how that can help drive the right price performance layer. When it comes to the kind of performance of these models, I think we've all seen the press that has come out over the last 6 months around the ever-growing size of these models. We're hearing about models that are hundreds of billions of parameters in size. And while these very large models...
I heard somebody say the other day, 11 billion.
11 billion. That's right.
11 billion.
If you're 7 years old, 11 billion is a really big number.
Or French.
Sorry, Charles?
Or French, yeah. Well, hopefully one day, Charles, we'll get a large language model that can actually translate you.
Yeah, hopefully.
Sorry, Chris, go.
Australian.
You look at the performance of these models. Bigger is not always better. While large models do give us the ability to generalize very well to a whole range of different problems, and there's some really nice emergent kind of capabilities that are coming out from these models. I think most of us have been quite surprised about how good these models can infer meaning or at least try and interpret what you're asking with the right prompting, with the right context. I think we've all been quite surprised on how good some of these models can be at doing that. But as I say, bigger is not always better. If I'm looking to deliver an interactive experience, a chat experience, actually a big model is not what I want at all. I want something where inference actually executes really quickly, and so a smaller model. And so we're seeing examples of that recently. You've seen the Falcon 40 billion, but also the 7 billion model come out recently, where we're really, really tuning these models around a particular problem or a task, and we're making them small enough to actually be able to execute within the memory footprint of a single GPU and actually performant enough that they'll deliver on an interactive style of experience. Chat may be a good example. Yeah. I think the last one is then, as you look beyond the cost and the performance, you then got accuracy. And again, you're trying to balance all of these things. You can't have all of them. It's very difficult to have all. And so, again, it's finding the sweet spot based on what problem are you really trying to solve for. Recognize that while generative AI and large language models are really pretty impressive and can solve for lots of problems, they're not the solution to every single problem. And so just be really clear that you're actually trying to solve for the right problem with this technology.
Yeah, it's the old hammer and nail analogy, right? When you've got a hammer like we have today with Gen AI, everything looks like a nail. And I think, as sort of technologists, but also advocates for customers, we also need to kind of advocate for a good, fair, balanced, approach to how these technologies are applied, and even if it is the right technology.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, Charles, are you going to show us some magic?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to hear you, Chris. But yeah, I think that you mentioned it a few times. So once people have those considerations in mind, we provide, I think what is interesting is that, fascinating actually, is that they don't need to start from scratch. We have a suite of tools that helps people kickstart their project, start experimenting. Don't just read about the subject, but you can go and launch into your AWS environment, a SageMaker environment where you leverage LLM. So I just put in place, I mean, it's very, very easy. So here, what you can see on the screen is our typical SageMaker environment. So you can do all your old-fashioned machine learning models. You can do deep learning. You can do so many different things, low code, no code, or fully custom. But if you look into it, there is this part called Jumpstart, and that helps you not only for generative AI, but in general, helps you really go faster into many problems that other people may have resolved or that the community has resolved. And you see here that there is this section around foundation models. Sorry. So when you click on it, it's very easy. You see the huge variety. We believe that actually, as Chris mentioned, that there is large models that are better at certain tasks than others. And we believe that you need to be able to get to make your choice between a 40 billion. How did you say, Mark? Sorry, I forgot the
11,
11 billion.
11 billion.
yeah, exactly. So between that or something smaller, trying for it is important to experiment to see how a different model also give you a different type of answer. So yes, and you have for text generation, but you also have the stable diffusion image generation. So I have created a quick environment. So here again, we're still in SageMaker Studio, which is our our interface basically to manage all our machine learning problems. And I have, you can see again here, so that's the interface, typical interface, and you can go again and see that those models are accessible through the Gemstart section. So I've selected the Stable Diffusion 2.1 base, and I have set up my environment. So basically, it requires a few minutes. That's why I've done it before. But basically, it will deploy the models and create the whole environment for you. And so you would click in deploy, and then once the model is deployed, you would have access to this page, which tell you that you are live pretty much. So you can open a notebook, a Jupyter notebook, and start experimenting. So here again, the code is not the code that I've created. Those are parts of code that comes with Gemstart, and that's why the name actually, because it helps developer start faster, accelerate the start with this kind of with technology in general. Because once again, it's not only about generative AI. So simple. You import some libraries. There is a little bit of there is few steps that are required, obviously, but I want to go directly, considering the time of scope, to the core of the element. And maybe you have already seen this kind of output, but in this case, basically, my prompt was about creating a cottage in impressionist style. And you see already after a few seconds, it generates something quite interesting. It really looks like a painting of a really famous artist or so on. So I just launch again the computation to generate a new output to see, because again, the next approach, the next generation will be different from the first one. So then after when we were talking with Chris, I heard about obviously a bear drinking a beer. So obviously I was interested to see what the output of that would be. And here again, a piece of code, but this time I'm generating 2 images instead of just one. But here my prompt is still bear drinking a beer. And again, you can see, so I don't know why I created this piece of water, but still interesting.
It's a beer backwards. I think he's had too many beers.
He's had too many beers, definitely.
Maybe, but so maybe I don't know if anyone has a prompt you would like to try. Let us know if you have on the chat. Please feel free to propose some prompts. Sorry, I'm trying to change.
You're very brave, Charles, offering to type in a prompt from a Twitch stream. have to do some content moderation.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot that part. Yeah, please, guys, I count on you to be nice with us and don't do anything that would that would be bad. That one is quite good.
Actually, right? Looking for a whale in a coffee cup.
A whale in it. Let's try. Sorry, I have double screen, so let me try to grab it up. I like this one actually very much. The first one, I could have that in my living room, frankly.
That's good. We'll get that one printed out, Charles. We'll frame it for you.
So, okay, a whale in a coffee cup. Let's see. So it just take a few seconds, obviously, but yeah, just to show again, from the complexity that we imagine when we talk about those large language model, image generation, and so on. You see, just in a few clicks, you are able to start playing with. Yeah, I'm not sure I recognize fully the maybe is the bear who drank a few beers who painted that one. That one looks more like the monster to me.
Yeah, it looks like some hallucinations.
Here's the whale. Actually, I can see the whale. This is a tail, but yeah, it's let's try another one. Let's try again too. to push to see if the second output is better. Sometimes you need to generate a few. So again, and here's that's for images, obviously, but the same thing, the same kind of accelerator has been also created for text. So this one, it looked like Casper the Ghost to me. Okay. Yeah. After I have, yeah.
Whales are not doing so well. So, Chris, if I'm a user out there and I'm experimenting in this sort of environment and I'm getting these sort of results that maybe I'm not happy with, what's the sort of mental model that I'd be looking to apply in terms of taking a model that's out there, applying it in Jumpstart, and doing my own little bit of tweaking? How does that look?
Yeah. And I think this is the journey that most of our customers go on, is you start with what's off the shelf. So do exactly what Charles has done. There's a whole range of different models that are available, foundation models that have been created for you by the organizations you've seen, some of our key partners. We've got the most popular foundation models available up on Jumpstart today. We've also announced Amazon Bedrock, which is going to be GA'd later this year. It's currently in private preview, but that will give you an API level access to these capabilities. So start with what's available, can leverage those base foundation models. You're going to get to the point where, with some useful prompting, there you go. Awesome, Charles. I like that. With some useful prompting and with what's called in context learning, where we're giving examples of the kind of output that we're looking for, you can actually get quite a long way without going down the road of adaptation or fine tuning. If you get to the point where you find that your prompt is getting extremely long, you're having to add an awful lot of context to get the model to actually generate the kind of responses that are meaningful for your world, maybe adaptation is something that's worthwhile. Now, fine-tuning has always been seen, when I say always, in the last 6 months, fine-tuning is seen as, is also seen as quite a heavy lift. But there are newer techniques, the parameter efficient fine-tuning with techniques like LoRa are allowing us to fine-tune these models with very small numbers of examples and do that extremely quickly. And so you can actually fine-tune a model with as little as a couple of dozen example documents, whether that's images, text documents, PDFs, that type of thing, and actually generate some results that are far more meaningful because they're aligned to your problem space, they're aligned to your world. And so that's generally the process that most of our customers go through. They'll try and leverage what's there, what's off the shelf initially. I think the other thing that we mentioned earlier on is this notion of how do we augment these large language models with some source of grounded truth. And so RAG as a technique, so this is retrieval augmented generation, where we're not just relying on the parameterized knowledge within the model, we're also relying on our enterprise data sources, whether that be a relational store or some kind of document store. We're using that and a large language model and combining these two worlds together to actually use the power of the large language model for things like summarization, similarity search, that type of thing, but then combining that with your trusted source of data internally so that you've got that level of attribution and grounding. And that's another way to avoid challenges like hallucination. So as Charles has shown, it's really pretty easy to jump into Jumpstart and get started. And in literally a couple of clicks, you can be underway. But I would start there and then see where that takes you. And if you need to explore further, we can support you through Jumpstart. We can support you through Bedrock. Reach out to one of your AWS account teams, local friendly solution architect or prototyping team. I'm sure they'd be very happy to help you take that idea to the next step.
It's really interesting, Chris. I mean, thanks for all the insight. The one thing I'm just taking away, working backwards from this sort of demo, is it's a really multifaceted, multidimensional approach, that customers, engineers need to be thinking about. They need to be thinking about the type of model, the type of application that model is going to serve, how they're going to ground that model. And this is especially important, I think, for enterprises, how they're going to ground that model in some truth, as you were just mentioning. But then also thinking about, the transparency that's required at scale from both a compute and a training and inference, an infrastructure, a security standpoint. It really is this multidimensional choose your own adventure, I guess, isn't it? Really.
Yeah.
And it just became really apparent to me that just, you know, what Charles has done here, it's super quick, it's super easy, but it's also really transparent. I can see the endpoints, I can see the environment. Nothing's hidden behind sort of a glossy front end. It's raw, but it's raw from an engineering standpoint, but I can also see how simple it is to get it out there into production in a true environment.
Yep. Yeah. And one of the nice things that you'll see with Jumpstart is this is operating within Charles's own account right now. And he's got his account number up there at the top of the screen just for everyone to read it. This is
we have it.
One of the nice things about both Jumpstart and Bedrock is that we're essentially bringing the model to you. You know, you're not taking your data and firing that across the open internet to some model that's been hosted elsewhere. You're essentially running these models as if they were in your own account, and that your data is not going anywhere. It's still well within the controls of the AWS cloud. So the standard permissions that you have around authentication and authorization, operating within your own VPC, your virtual private area of the cloud. That is a really compelling value proposition for our customers. Now, that flexibility of model choice through Jumpstart and Bedrock, the ability to do it securely, privately, you know, with confidence, but also doing it at the right price point as we offer up our custom silicon. They're really compelling capabilities that we're seeing our customers gravitate towards. What have you ended up with here, Charles? I'm not sure if it's a penguin or a whale.
This one is a whale because, and again, it goes back to the prompt and how much experiment is required. Because so Nomer Bear in our chat asked to suggest a whale in a coffee cup, and the whale in a coffee cup was not giving that great results. But if you change a whale swimming in a coffee cup, then the results are quite good. I mean, again, it's quite nice, I think. And that's, again, it's obviously it's a funny way to illustrate it, but fundamentally there's prompt engineering is going to be central to a lot of the output generated, and having the right word, it's sometimes the difference between a little bit of a fail iteration versus something that produce good results. So people needs to have this capacity, yes, to again go very, very fast. The ownership of the data and so on is, I think, is also fundamental, and we have a lot of customer coming to us because they want to keep control on their data. They don't want others to benefit from it and so on. We've heard about the Samsung story where some of the very secret data from Samsung got basically ingested by ChatGPT, and it became an issue for those employees. So customers are concerned about that. So thanks so much, Chris, for re-emphasizing about this priority, this need, and how we are also on our side trying to answer those concerns.
Yeah, it's a pretty good whale, Charles. I like it.
Right?
It is pretty good. So, Charles, just as we head into the back few minutes of today's conversation, I mean, Chris has given me a hell of a lot to think about, and I almost want to get in there now and start making pictures of whales in coffee cups. But I mean, you said something that was super interesting, which is, you know, just that little variation in the wording in the question or the prompt that you provide the model. From the work that you've been doing with customers, obviously it takes some time. The model, being able to converse with the model appropriately is important. So kind of what's the role of patience as customers work through this?
Okay, so I ask customer, okay, because asking me is very difficult as I'm not the most patient person in the world. So in the customer seat, no. So what is the exact? I forgot what is the exact quote of Jeff Bezos, but as customers are always very beautifully unsatisfied, and it's true. The problem is there is a lot of false belief versus on how mature is the technology and how fast you can get something up and running at industry level, at production level. And we've experienced with one of our customer actually the fact that, well, we had to experiment different LLM, different models, because they were not generating the same quality of output and so on. And that's where that's where, Chris, what you shared with us is so important, because people need to understand that there is a part of experiment. There's some iteration that are required. There is different models have different strengths, and it can be frustrating on the customer perspective sometimes when they don't understand that, or they're comparing to something that they believe is the absolute North Star, but without considering all the data related issues and other elements. So it is a little bit of a jungling art about trying to help the customer understand what we can do, the time it requires, the efforts it requires, but at the end it works well, and the customer is also happy because they understand also through the experiment or through the initiatives, they understand also better on their own how they're going to be able to apply it to other projects and so on. So the learnings, it's sometimes can be not frustrating, maybe it's a strong word, but can be not expected. The effort may not be anticipated appropriately, but there's a lot of learnings along the way, and so the next iteration usually go either faster or is more the mindset is there, it's at the right place.
Yeah, so it's not a silver bullet, right? I think you have to work with it, and it does take some time and diligence and effort to get it to where it needs to be.
But I would even say it's
Right.
very human. It's like humans. If you ask me to write a report and you write Mark a report, you in English, you will write it far better than me, and faster. And me, I will need to iterate. There's things I will pronounce maybe that are not perfect and so on. So it always get back to the training part and the data I receive and the fact that all of that is also important. So we have a tendency, I'm always saying that, but we have a tendency of expecting more of the technology than of the human. But I think that's another illustration of that.
So, Chris,
I think Charles just said that he's blaming his inability to write English on his training.
Oh, now I'm using Jumpstart, so I can improve my. I can do a first pass, and I ask reformulate it better, and the output is good. So Jumpstart rocks. Save my time.
So, Chris, any last parting words of wisdom for us and our viewers today as we head off into the world of Jumpstarts to start generating whales and coffee cups?
I'd maybe come back to the hype. So we talked a little bit about the hype and just a general level of interest in this space. And while it's awesome and generative AI is definitely dinner table and boardroom conversation today, I'd bring people back to basics and remind them that this is just machine learning at the end of the day. It's not, you just use a great phrase. There's no silver bullet. This is not magic. It's machine learning. It's a really, really good predictive model that is telling you what the next token could be or the next word could be. While that gets you so far, you'll very quickly, and many organizations realize this, doing ML at scale requires robustness, repeatability, scalability, security, automation, without having to throw people at that problem so that you can scale it. And so have fun, play, experiment, get in and use Jumpstart for all it's got to offer, but recognize that running at scale is going to require that level of robustness, your belt and braces to make this work for you long term. And so, SageMaker is a great platform for doing that. So a really great place for you to bring that life cycle to life. But recognize that there's more to it than just creating whales in coffee cups. You actually need to productionize this stuff and make it real. And that hopefully we can help you on that journey as well.
Awesome. Chris, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. You're a wealth of knowledge. I think you've really laid out the groundwork very clearly for everybody. So again, thank you for joining. Hopefully you can join us again in episode 3 this year as we wrap up this Gen AI series. It'd be great to have you back.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. Mark, thank you so much also. We have one more minute.
You know, I'm just blown away with
By
the
the
blue
whale.
stuff. Oh, the whale in particular. I was going to ask for a French whale in a cafe au lait, but I didn't get a chance. Charles, look, it's been a pleasure again. I'm really excited to get back into the prototyping show and to sit and have a chat the last Thursday of every month. Thank you to everybody who's joined.
Yeah.
Thanks again to Chris. As always, if you have questions, reach out to the prototyping show at amazon.com. We'll be happy to take those questions. Hope everybody stays well, and we will see you for episode 2.
Yes, do not forget, next time, generative AI, you'll be behind the driving seat and you will see hands-on experience, hands-on example. Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you so much. Good to be back. We're looking forward for next month.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.